All right. Hey, Jeff, I'm so glad to meet you here, interview you. It was so much fun jamming with you at NAMM. How are you doing today?
Yes, Donna. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing great. Yeah. Well, it
Cool.
looks like we had some snowfall last night, so my yard's covered in snow.
Oh, no, wait, isn't that kind of unusual for the Seattle area?
A bit, yes. Winter said, "I'm not done yet," and came back and hit us one more time. So I think
Ah,
that's the last of it, though.
hopefully. Yeah, I'm in Southern California now. I grew up in New York. I know what snow is. That's why I moved. So
I see. Good.
awesome. So tell us, I've been, like I said, it was so much fun jamming with you at NAMM. I hear you on the radio all the time. You've been around playing, all that kind of stuff. Can you tell us? I want to know about your journey. From what I understand, you were exposed to woodwind instruments and the saxophones in junior high school. What was that? What was your journey like?
Well, my love of music really started even as early as elementary school when they had the
Cool.
choirs, and I remember this Japanese gentleman would come in with a ukulele to every classroom and he would sing, and we would have so much fun because his energy was really infectious. He was so upbeat and friendly and fun. And we're talking when I was kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. So this is
Wow.
before we actually had instruments. And he would come in, we'd sing all sorts of songs. And he taught us Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. Burt Bacharach. What a great place to start. And I remember singing. I remember a lot of my childhood singing a lot, and I'm actually quite a terrible singer. but 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 I remember my family would say, "Would you stop singing?" Because it was kind of annoying to them. so so. But the point is, I guess I had no skills in that area, but the love was there, and so I found my way through instruments. And I still remember getting the reason why I bring all this up is because it's all because of public school education. I'm a big advocate of the arts in public schools, and I would never have been exposed to any of this had it not been for a very strong arts supportive arts funding in Washington State, which
Okay.
is where I'm from, Seattle. And so they gave us the little song. Actually, I have, hold on.
Okay, this is gonna be cool.
I recently picked one up for
Ah,
old time's sake.
that's a
They,
flutophone.
exactly, flutophone. Mine was actually black that,
Oh,
that I had, but anyway.
oh, funny.
And so they gave us these things. I remember it was a big deal. And it was the time when H&R Puff and Stuff, that television show, was on about the kid who had a friend that was a flute, the talking flute. And so this was my friend, and I had it in my back pocket the whole time. So this started a relationship with music, connected me to an instrument, and it has grown ever since that day. I think it was fourth grade. Fifth grade, we switched to clarinet, and so
Oh,
on. And then eighth grade, I added the saxophone. But
oh,
it's a long
wow.
answer to your question. But the point is that I was exposed to it all through school. And then when it came time to play the actual instrument, clarinet, my father was the guy who taught me my first couple fingering, positions, etc. And he did that.
Is your father a musician?
He was not a professional musician. He just did it as a hobby, and he's since passed a long time ago.
Oh,
But he was my first teacher. Yeah.
wow. Okay, this is great to know. I didn't know that you started on the clarinet necessarily. It's funny because I taught public school for many years, and I taught third grade. We used recorders back in
Wow.
New York.
Yeah.
And then because I was the band teacher, I was watching how the kids responded to recorder, seeing who would be good on particular instruments, and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So I'm totally with you when you say public school education. Music in public schools is so important, and you don't have to be a professional musician, as a result. But I think it just helps make us more cultured as a society.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It is not about everyone becoming a professional musician. It's about being exposed to music and kind of expressing yourself in that arena for however long you enjoy it.
Yeah, and I like the way you said that too, because it is another form of expression. I found with a lot of my students in schools, some kids just didn't do well academically, but they ran to the band room because that's just what related to them. That
Absolutely.
was their strength, and
Yeah.
that's what saved them in schools.
Yeah, I mean, I spent my whole junior high and high school experience in the band room, taking one of those Manhasset music stands and making it go flat and putting my lunch on it and eating my lunch in the band room. That's where I felt comfortable.
You know what? I did the same thing.
I still do today. As an instructor, I still do that.
Oh my God, that's too funny. Wait, by the way, where do you teach right now?
I teach at a place called Shoreline Community College, and that's in North Seattle, Washington.
Oh, okay, great. All right, we'll talk more about that later.
Hmm.
Had to get sidetracked for a second. So,
Hmm.
all right, so you had the flutophone, which is funny because I think it's funny. In New York, we started on recorders. I didn't know what a flutophone was until someone told me many years later. Very similar though. You had that upbringing and stuff. What made you switch from clarinet to saxophone in the eighth grade?
Um, I didn't, I actually still played clarinet all the way through college, but I really added the saxophone and fell in love with it. It's just when I heard the jazz band playing, sort of cooler, hipper music, very
Yeah.
exciting music. And I just, um, catching the bug of exciting music and wanting to be a part of exciting music. That was it. So I begged my parents for a saxophone. And so they got me one. And I remember everything. I remember picking up my first Bundy saxophone it was before Craigslist. It was the nickel want ads in Seattle Times.
Oh,
Went downtown Seattle, got the saxophone. My parents insisted that I boil the mouthpiece just to disinfect it. And so I remember sitting there looking at the water, which was cold, waiting for it to boil so I could boil the mouthpiece so I could play it. That
wow.
that feeling of anticipation, like I can't wait to play this thing. And I think if there's a gift in music that I might have, that's it. It's just the enthusiasm, because I still feel that way. I just recently got the new model of Yamaha's Alto. It's the same thing all over again. It's like, oh, I can't wait to play this thing.
You know what? Another gift you seem to have too is an incredible memory.
Yeah, yeah. I remember everything, everything. Yeah,
Wow, that's you know why? Because it made an impression on you.
yeah,
It made a mark. Just like you said, that infectious energy from that first teacher really made a mark on you, made an impression, and that's what. And you know what? You've become that if you think about it. That infectious energy, which is great. Which is
yeah.
awesome. So now, so you're in high school, you're in junior high school. What made you decide to go down the path of becoming a musician?
I think a couple of artists. I went in, I forget what, I think I was in probably ninth grade, which is back then, it was still junior high school. And every summer we would travel, my parents would travel to Hawaii to visit our relatives over there. And so um, I remember Chuck Mangione was really huge at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was on tour, and he happened to be playing at the Maui Tennis Stadium. So we went there, and afterwards, also, not only was it a great concert, but afterwards, he and the band sat on the edge of the stage and signed autographs. And they were so approachable and so friendly. It was really special, very special to get a chance to shake hands with him and talk to him. And, you know, it same thing happened when I saw a Spyro Gyra concert later. So, you know, these are memories that are really ingrained in my head, left big impacts. I said to myself, I want to do specifically that.
Yeah, it's funny. We're probably around the same age, and Chuck Mangione. Oh my gosh, yeah, the memories that's bringing back for me. And I grew up playing trumpet, so I play trumpet as well
Oh,
as
okay.
saxophone.
All right.
And what really impressed me, well, first of all, Chuck Mangione's songwriting. I mean, I
Hmm.
think
That's it.
it's just there's no words to describe it. It's a work of art. It really is. Um, but also his saxophone player, and I can't believe it's escaping me.
Chris, well, there's two different guys. Chris Vidala was the later guy,
Right.
but before him, Jerry Nywood, who sadly passed away in a plane accident a couple of years back, a
Oh,
plane crash. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I saw Chris, and when he was back where I'm from at the Westbury Music Fair, and I just remember he had a fortress of instruments around him, and just his ability just to just the thing about Chuck Mangione, and I guess that time period, I just felt like the solos were so melodic, and
Hmm.
they told a story, and yeah, these guys had such technique as well, but it just really, that's what got me, that's what gripped me, I
Hmm.
just.
Absolutely. You talk about Chris Vidal. He's so talented. Um, I mean, I just picked up this too, alto flute. So
Oh,
if you look around my studio, I've got all sorts of instruments out. And I'm constantly trying to expand what I do, and with every new instrument or newer instrument, it's a new challenge, new set of challenges, and I like learning things. So it's saxophone, the electric wind instrument, the iwi, the alto flute. Try to do as much as I can, and also in a concert, I like to present something, an hour and a half, however long it is, of variety to the audience. So it's not just one voice the whole time.
so then let me ask you this question then. I'm going to go off track just for a little bit. You mentioned that learning a new instrument is a new challenge. I totally get that, but talk a little bit more about that, like, specific challenges that you found. Actually, with the electronic wind instrument, that would be interesting to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, that's again, I was at a concert. I saw Michael Brecker playing that instrument. Back then it was called the Steiner phone because a guy named Niall Steiner invented it. And back then it was a prototype. It was like a huge IBM computer cable coming out, a thick one, coming out like a big ribbon. It would look very awkward, but it was, the first question is, what the heck is that thing? And then he played it. And I can speak for everyone in the Palace Theater in LA when we saw him. I can speak for everyone. Our jaws collectively dropped not because it was a gimmick, and that's really important. Not because, oh, what a cool thing, it's an electric saxophone. It's so much more than that. The way he played it and the song that he chose to play it on was not a funky fusion song. It was a gentle, beautiful jazz ballad in a sentimental mood, an old, Duke classic. And he played it so musically. That's the thing that blew me away. So sensitively. That's like, wow, couldn't believe it.
Wow. And it made an impression. And so at that point, were you able to buy that prototype or did you have to wait a little bit?
I had to wait about a year and a half before they actually made Kai made what was called the EW 1000.
Okay.
And there's been many incarnations. Now I'm playing the 4000. There is a 5000, but I haven't got that yet. But anyway, all my saxophone buddies, we ran out to the store to pick them up as soon as they became available.
Oh, wow. Now, what's your approach? I'm jumping all over the place. That's okay. What's your approach to the iwi as compared to, is it different than approaching the saxophone? How do you do that?
Yeah, it is. Brecker said, I think his percentages are correct. He goes, it's about 75% of the same fingering of saxophone. It's close, but it's not exactly. Okay. There's no side keys on the iwi. So, there's no side keys on the iwi. So you continually regenerate the octave by moving your thumb up a set of rollers. It's similar, very, very similar, but yet different in feel because the keys don't move. It's all touch sensitive. So you have to be very, very accurate with your placement.
And also with the touch centers, I actually haven't had the opportunity to play an iwi. So is it also, if you touch it really hard, will that affect the...
No, that doesn't change. It's just either on or off. Yeah.
Got it.
As a matter of fact, sometimes you don't mean to hit a button and you do because if you're being lazy or sloppy, and it will trigger. So
now that sounds like to me that it's a great tool to clean up your saxophone fingering.
Yep. In some ways, yes. Yeah.
Because of that. I mean, yes, you're not pressing down keys like, with the weight of the saxophone keys, but that's the first thought that I had in my head.
Yeah.
How long did it take to adapt to, I guess the sound, the tone process in terms of an iwi? Because it's different with the air too.
Yeah. If anything, it's actually closer to flute in that there's no reed and it's all, well, saxophone is too, but it's all about the diaphragm. So much of your dynamics and your musicality is about the diaphragm. Because you don't want to, the harder you blow, the more the envelope opens up and the more the filter makes the sound brighter. So that's what makes it sort of sound acoustic, is that it has that sort of same kind of dynamic sensitivity that a saxophone or a flute might have. Okay. That's what's great about it, but also that's the challenge of it. You have to be real careful about how you play it.
Got it. Okay. But in a way, though, that's good, though, because if it was something that was totally different than playing the saxophone, I'm sure it would take a lot more work and also a lot more Well, I'm going to say the word maintenance too. I mean, you
Hmm.
play a lot of instruments. So how often do you get a chance to practice everything, throughout the week or every day or whatever?
Yeah, this is my sacred morning time to practice before I go to college. I teach college basically Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and sometimes Fridays. It's kind of a weird schedule. Anyway, I start each class around noon-ish, so it gives me, on the most part, the mornings to work on my stuff. Practice my stuff. Like, for instance, tonight, I was just practicing before you called me. I have a gig with Pete Chrisley tonight, who's the wonderful, masterful tenor player, he and his wife, Linda, have moved to Tacoma, and they started a little big band. So I'm playing with them tonight, and I was just
Oh,
running over some changes.
awesome. Oh, that's so cool. All right. So then, you don't practice every instrument every day? I mean, I can't, or do you?
I can't. Yeah, I try to, I try to connect with my saxophone at least once a day. Really get, this is, if I can just, I'm trying to convey this to the students, and it's been a challenge. Through my years, I've gone, like everybody else, through periods of great practice and then just being so busy I don't touch my horn. And then I feel terrible about that, and I become disconnected technically, emotionally from the horn. It's a very bad feeling. And
Yeah.
the go-to emotion for most people is guilt. Like, what's wrong with me? I should be practicing more. I think the older I get now, Donna, every year that I get older, I get a little bit wiser, and I take it easy on myself with that regard. You know, I don't beat myself up. I just try to rearrange my schedule so that I can carve out time to practice. And these days, it's completely shifted in my mind to where practicing is not something, well, I should do this, I should do that. It's something I'm dying to do. Like, I'm thinking, just as I was excited about opening up the new saxophone, etc., I'm excited about my morning. Like, for instance, tomorrow, Tuesday, I got the whole day off. So I've got my practice things scheduled. I'm going to work on this song and this song and this song. And I just got this alto flute. I need to work with it, find where the pitch centers are, etc. So I've got my day planned. And
Yeah.
it's about the enthusiasm is there, and the curiosity. That's probably the biggest word. What would happen if is how you need to approach all your instruments.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And
Yeah.
what's interesting too, you mentioned with each year you get a little wiser. I'm also wondering if, like, with your practice sessions, because as we get older, there's a lot more responsibilities. But I'm wondering if you're also, and I'll just put this in quotes, like, smarter about approaching practice and, getting more done in less time.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because time is of the essence. You only have time flies by when you're practicing. Um, if you're doing it right, I should say, time flies by when you're practicing. Um, and so I always I tell my students, my private students that come to my studio here to practice and learn improv, listening to music, there's passive listening, which is good. You just put on a record and enjoy it, cook something or whatever, driving your car. That's great. But once in a while, like it happened to me at the gym, I'm listening to Clifford Brown and Sonny Rollins. And I'm just listening just because it's cool. Then Sonny plays a really cool lick. And I almost fell off the little elliptical. It's like, that was so cool. Trying to rewind it. It caught my attention. Why? Because it caught my attention. Because it's cool. There's not really, I don't want to give it much thought. It sounds cool. And so in the past, I would just like, yeah, Sonny Rollins is cool. He does some cool stuff. Now, what I do, like an educator, I shift away from the enjoyment side, to tell you the truth, and get into the other enjoyment side for me, which is the analyzation part. So this is the thing, though. There's a lot of action steps, and this is my tip to anyone listening. There's a lot of action steps to develop your own vocabulary. So number one is just a lot of listening, passive listening, enjoyment listening. And then you find something that you like. And this is where you have to go into action. You have to identify and quantify the thing you like so you can grab it and make it yours. So the steps for me are, I took note of what song it was, you know, uh, and what recording it was, so I could find that lick, you know. I went to YouTube and grabbed that recording, right? And now I have it on my laptop. So I've got the song on my laptop. And then I scour through and find the actual moment we're talking about. So we're not talking about an entire 3-minute solo. We're
Right.
talking about several seconds of a phrase,
Right.
just a very specific moment. I identify the actual notes that he played, note for note, copy him till it's comfortable. Then, and this is the part where most people just kind of stop. Then they have to wait for C sharp minor to occur so they can play that lick. And that's okay. That's a good start, but that's very limited. So the reason why I'm talking about all these steps is it's a matter of digesting the information.
Yeah.
So now that you've gotten the lick phrase, and it's true what they say, now put it in all keys.
Yeah.
And for me, it takes forever. It takes a long time. But I found a faster way is if I identify it by numbers. It's different for everybody. But if it's a complex lick with a lot of altered notes, which this one was, it's easier for me to try to define it by its numbers. It's the flat 9, it's the sharp 9, it's the whatever it is.
Right, got it.
Like you're memorizing a code, because that's what it is. And then take those numbers to every key. It's faster for me. For me, it's faster that way. Anyway, the point is I'm still working on that lick, and I'm,
okay, I'm curious, how long do you take to work on a lick? Is it like a week, a month,
Mm-hmm. I try to enjoy the process. It's a very good question. I spent a whole day working on another Sonny Rollins lick, which I loved, and it took me, I was thinking to myself, and this is another thing, I was thinking to myself, oh, it's just taking so long. What's wrong with me? That frustrated, negative feeling, completely unproductive way of thinking.
Yeah.
Immediately stifle that, immediately switch it to this. I am really digging down into this lick. And it's going to take my college professor back in Cal State Long Beach told me this. He said, Jeff, don't worry about Tom Scott and Eddie Daniels, and those are the contemporaries at the time.
Yeah.
Don't worry about those guys and how long it might take them, because you're not them. You're you. It's going to take exactly as long as it takes. So it's not about how quickly I can get something done. It's about how well I get it done.
Okay, how do you, now this is interesting. How do you define well? Like what, yeah, because you
Okay,
mentioned.
let me hold on a second. Let me grab my saxophone.
Okay, great.
Okay. So I don't know how this is going to sound over my little earpiece. Just an example. Sounds terrible in my ears. That's one Sonny Rollins lick it's in a different key than he did it in. But anyway, I've taken that lick and put it all through the keys, and I revisit that lick. And so how long do you practice it? I can tell if I barely have something because it's not coming out smoothly.
Okay.
So I'll, like a piece of wood, I'll just sand it again and again and again. I've got certain places in my studio. It's a large daylight basement, so I walk around a lot. And I stand, like every saxophone player, I stand against different walls because it sounds different. That's what we do. But anyway, it's a very peaceful and meditative place I get into when I'm practicing. It's like sacred. It is, because that's where you're building you. It's really important. Now, I mentioned passive listening, and when you find a lick like that one that you really like, you take the time to break it apart. It's a lot of other part of your brain, analyzation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But our goal is to return to the enjoyment part. And the only way you get there is repetition. 1,000 times if it takes 1,000 times. Some people are faster than others. So don't worry about that, because you're enjoying the process. You're not enjoying just getting there. You're enjoying the whole process. And I might play that lick in the same key 50 times, 100 times. I'm sure my family's like, okay, play a different lick. But what I'm going for is to teach my body the movements of the phrase. And when do I know I have it? When I'm thinking about lunch, when I'm thinking about next week's gig, but my saxophone is still playing.
Yeah. Okay.
And quite literally, you've gone from the frontal lobe, which is doing all the organization, to the deeper recesses of your brain, where it's becoming second nature. And that's when it's time to move to a new key, and you start all over again.
Now, when you say the repetition, so I'm going to even break this down even further. I'm thinking it's not just playing the lick, and not just playing the lick in the original rhythms. I'm guessing, and I can't really put words in your mouth, but is it possible that maybe you're also changing up the rhythms? You're maybe changing up the maybe the groove of it, or
Hmm.
adding to it, subtracting to it, whatever.
Yeah, I do that after I actually get the original phrase down, and then I'll start, and it kind of happens naturally. We're human, so we just start, for lack of a better term, making happy accidents. Like, oh, it sounds cool if I start on a different place or different beat. Yeah. And it's amazing to me. I'm always amazed that you take a lick like that. I can't even do it for you right now. And move it over 1/8 note, it becomes a completely new lick.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's
I
true.
can't, I can't find my way around it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is really interesting to me because you're talking about how you approach vocabulary, which is super important. A lot of, I always equate like learning vocabulary on an instrument with learning vocabulary as if speaking, and it's all the same stuff. And we have to use the repetition. We have to first we have to hear it. We have to hear it a lot, hear it enough so we could sing it, because you're
Hmm.
not hearing it if you can't sing it. And
Singing it.
then yeah, and then work it through, get it down, but then you really know you own it when you could put it in a conversation without like forcing it into the conversation.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
so cool. So now in terms of practicing, uh what I'm wondering if, like, I guess songs, maybe licks guide your practicing. What does a typical practice session look like for you?
I'll probably warm up by like maybe I will have gone through maybe 3 or 4 of those keys for that kind of lick like that, and I'll pick up where I left off, review those, and launch into several new keys. So I'm kind of continually working on this thing, and then but I always start before that though. I always start with long tones. Just make some sound, some pretty sound, get the air going through there.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
sound is, for me, I think sound is the most important thing, because if you don't have a good sound, people are going to tune you out.
yeah, and only later in my life have I really started to put my music first, which is different for me. In other words, I've always been a part of the Rippingtons or Acoustic Alchemy or David Benoit, and played with them. So they've hired me to play with them. So I want to do a good job for them. So I'm
Right.
practicing their music, right? It's typical. Or if I'm like playing with Pete Chrisley tonight, I wanted to practice his songs to make sure I got them down. But rarely do I've got gigs coming up of my own this weekend, Thursday, Friday in Philly, and Saturday in Columbus.
Oh, wow.
It's like, Jeff, you should practice for your gigs. So I actually take out the alto flute and put up my songs and practice my parts. So I'm constantly refreshing. Yeah,
And by the way, audience, if you don't know, you have at least 9 CDs out, if I'm not mistaken.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, you got tons of music. So then okay, let me ask you this then. You've got your sacred practice time. Do you also have sacred creative time? Like, what's your creative process?
Good question. Yeah, I feel like it's always kind of, I'm always looking for stuff that inspires me, not only licks per se, but songs, and then production of songs. And I think there's sort of an incubation period where you have a lot of listening going on, and then it kind of rotates or orbits around and to where now it's the opposite, and now you're going to output, you're going to create music. Yeah.
When you're creating, what tools do you use a piano, or do you use a saxophone? Are you just like kind of noodling around and say, oh, that's really good, let me write it down? Like,
Hmm.
what's your process like
Yeah,
actually?
I usually I've got a keyboard over here. I usually have a keyboard nearby or a piano, and I sit down and just start noodle around. Yeah, till I find a phrase or two that I think is interesting, and then I kind of develop it. Yeah,
And then
and
you
I
use
write. Yeah, as soon as I find something I like, I try to again shift gears from creative mode to analyzing mode, figure out what it is I just played, you
got
know,
it.
and then put it into my computer through Logic, so I can have a demo of it.
Got it. Okay, so you use Logic. Okay, got it. All right.
Mhm.
Also, so you probably do all the work in your studio, I'm assuming, and then you'll figure out like what instruments you want playing on that, other than
Mhm.
saxophone and piano and
Yep,
such.
yep, it is. And these days, I mean, the software is so outstanding. They have amazing pianos, amazing strings, amazing everything. Just in a laptop.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, let me get back to, I guess, your overall journey we went through junior high, high school. You decided, oh, you saw Chuck Mangione, you saw all these guys back then. That's what I want to do. Where did you go to college?
Went to Berklee College of Music for
Okay.
2 years. It was a wonderful experience. And a lot of my friends I made then are still my friends today. It was at the time I went there, they didn't have the really cool studios that they have now. It was not as nice, quite nice of a school, but the information was still solid. I went there specifically to understand jazz, and that's exactly what I got from the place. They had a very good series of harmony courses, and maybe because I teach harmony to my private students in jazz improv, the Berklee method is firmly ingrained in my head, which is
Yes.
nothing so unusual, but a certain way of looking at chords and scales. Yeah.
Absolutely, like the chord scale theory and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had taken I have a master's certificate from Berkeley, and
Oh,
I took a jazz improv class with Gary Burton, and that really totally changed
ah,
my thinking. He's a great guy.
I took his course as well, and at the time must have been a smart aleck because I was with some friends with bad influence on me. we were a tiny bit rowdy in his class,
Ah,
and I think he gave me a C. And
oh,
this, it was based on attendance, and I was there for every class, but he gave me a C. I think I annoyed him. And it's funny. We recently, I think it was 2 years ago, the Rippingtons played up uh, in Canada, and I shared a van ride with him, with Gary Burton and his band. And I
oh.
didn't bring it up. I was like, "Hey, man, I want to talk to you about my grade from 1983."
Do you remember me?
I probably deserved it. Probably deserved it.
Oh, that's too funny.
But actually, and you probably, well, since you took the course from him, the thing I got from Gary, the most important thing is a very important thing is someone asked him, same question you asked me, how often do you practice your scales and stuff like that? And he says, it's kind of a funny answer, but he says, I practiced for 30 minutes back in 1970 something, and everyone laughs. He goes, I'm serious. I spent a lot of time with music, but my thinking has changed. I'm not saying, okay, here's the book and here are the scales. He said, that wasn't for me. And I don't think that's for most people.
Yeah,
Most people hate that. He
yeah.
says, if I want to learn D flat and get comfortable in D flat, I'm going to find 6 songs in D flat and play them over and over again. So more of an organic approach to practicing is his point.
Yeah,
I
and
understood.
I actually asked him, I said, Gary, I also study with Jimmy Heath. He started
Wow,
he
good
started
teachers.
oh yeah, he's a great guy. He started the master's program for jazz at Queens College back in New York. And Jimmy's he's a great player. He's all about patterns though. So we would have to learn a couple of patterns in all keys each week. And so I said to Gary, are you the type of person that, do you practice patterns? Do you believe in practicing patterns and all that kind of thing or not? And he said, no, I don't. I just know my chord scales well enough to be able to just create melodies off of that. And
Mm-hmm,
that really, really stuck out to me
mm-hmm.
because I think there's a dichotomy. A lot of people feel, got to memorize as many patterns as possible. And then other people are like, I don't even want to just deal with that. Um, what's your, you're kind of giving us your approach a little bit, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's the same thing as learning the phrases. Pattern or phrase, it means a predetermined organization of notes. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's not right and wrong here. But when you were talking about jazz improv, the only reason why you'd learn a pattern is to get comfortable in a key, to get fluidity. That's all you're looking for is flow of motion and emotion. So a lot of times practicing patterns helps you get there. It's like an exercise.
Right.
So it's not good or it's not right or wrong doing it that way. For me, I might do a little bit of that, but I soon get bored of that and automatically just start making up stuff that I want to do in that same key. So basically, I feel like I'm getting the same job done, in a more interesting way, because playing a pattern is not, to me, very interesting. It will shun me from practicing, and we don't want that. We want to be invited and pulled into practicing. So I've got to develop ways. I've got many students. I've had over the years hundreds of students, and I include myself in that category. I'm also my student. As a matter of fact, on my hard drive, you'll see students, and you'll see this. Everyone's got a folder of the songs they're working on, and sure enough, in the J's is Jeff, and that's my folder.
Wow.
And my folder has twice as much as anyone else's folder, 4 times as much. Because every time I find something that's interesting, I throw it in my folder and say, get to that later.
You know, that's gold right there, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of people that take up the saxophone later in life who may, I find a lot of people that subscribe to my website and stuff like that, they say to me, oh, I just found the saxophone now, or it's been on my bucket list, you know, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing this at like 50 something, and they don't know what to do, where to go, whatever. And they feel like they talk to a professional, you know, professional performing musician or whatever, they feel like, oh, they've made it, so they don't really have to work on anything. You know, it's that false sense of thinking and stuff like that. But what I always say to my students or whoever I talk to, no, you talk to any real good professional player, you know, like yourself, like Jimmy Heath, and you'll probably say, no, I've got so much more work to do. You know, it's like,
Absolutely.
yeah, you
Absolutely.
find more things that you're curious about, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
you want to figure out and all that kind of thing.
That is the absolute truth. It couldn't be more true. And it's a wonderful place to be. It's the whole, Zen proverb of the beginner's mind is, is, is what you want to maintain. There is no mastery of anything. That's an illusion. It's you're constantly beginning to understand something, because that's the most exciting time when the light bulb goes off, as it were. Our goal is to continually put new stuff and interesting stuff in front of us to where our light bulb is constantly going off. That's the whole point.
Yeah, because you never stop learning. And the
No.
moment you stop learning, you know, for me, then I'm in the grave. You know what I mean? That's the bottom
Yeah.
line. You're always
Yeah.
learning. That's
Yeah, and
awesome.
when I was at Berkeley, what the light bulb moment was when the diatonic harmonies, if you'll remember, stacking up the little notes and everything, and identifying the diatonic chord structures in a major scale, and then we went into harmonic minor and where that comes from, altered scales, etc. The magical moment was when I finally understood it all. It was very confusing up until that point, and at Berkeley they really laid it out very, very carefully and methodically.
Yeah.
When the light bulb went off, it still hasn't gone off, because it's one of my favorite subjects is jazz improv, because it is, number one, it is quantifiable, it's explainable, it doesn't go on forever. The amount of materials you have,
Yeah.
12 notes, and when you talk about a chord, it's the first, the third, the fifth, the seventh, the ninth, the 11th, 13th.
Yeah.
That's it. They might be altered in some ways, right?
Yeah.
But beyond that, that's it. That's as high as we go. So uh, and yet all that music can be made. Infinite amounts of combinations can be made. That's what's exciting to me.
You know, it's sort of like this conversation we're having right now. You know, I just barely met you at NAMM, jammed with you. That was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we decided to have this interview, which is great. But I had a couple of questions I had in mind, but we're going off in different directions. We're improvising right now.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
always try to make that analogy. You know, if you can have a conversation with somebody, there's no fear in improvisation. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we all have our different stages and stuff. And actually, you know, that would be a great question to ask you, because, you know, I'm sure the students that you teach are at all levels. So, you know, I guess stuff for people to expect at each stage of improvisation.
Yeah, I try to. That's the challenge of teaching, is to be in one room or one jazz ensemble, for instance, with players at different levels of experience.
Yeah.
That's tough. And so I try to challenge everyone and try to keep everyone interested, and try to meet them where they are, and try to explain things in such a way that they can have some success from the explanation. You know what I mean? Not, in other words, not saying something so complex that it's too far for them to comprehend, or too lowball to where it's just boring and too simple. Try to
Right.
find that sweet spot where it's beyond where they're at right now, but maybe they can reach it.
That's definitely a challenge. And whether it's an ensemble is hard enough. That's harder than actually a private student, because with a private student, you know, you get to know them and you get to, you know, you push the carrot a little bit farther away each time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in an
Mm-hmm.
ensemble, that's tricky. And you've got kids coming from you, and I will say kids. You got kids
Yeah.
coming to you from all different types of experiences. Because I know for myself in New York, music is very strong on Long Island. It's very strong. I mean, I had a jazz band for my fourth and fifth graders. and
Mm-hmm.
it's was a little bit unusual, but it certainly was not unusual for junior high bands to have jazz bands and stuff. But in
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles, it's totally different. It's nothing near that, and it's sad. So, as a college instructor, the hard thing for you have kids coming from all over the country, even the world, with varying degrees of understanding and experience. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's really challenging.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And what makes it even harder, I was bemoaning this with a colleague who also teaches at a community college. Jim Sisko teaches at Bellevue Community College. Great reputation, great, wonderful player. And we're talking about this very subject. And the fact that we're in two-year schools, we are constantly rebuilding the program. Because as soon as 2 years is a very short time.
Yeah.
And a great player might come through, great, and then like, oh, they're leaving for the UW or whatever. That's kind of the point of our school. We're a transfer school, and so I call it catch and release. Catch and release. They come in, they're here for just a short period of time, and they're gone. So
That's true, but you know what? You perform an important role because you're taking whatever experience that they had in the past, and
mm-hmm.
you're trying to you have to get them to a certain level in order for them to
Mm-hmm.
move on.
Yeah,
Even if I'm sure a lot of them go to music schools. Some may even go to the military, all that kind of thing,
mm-hmm.
whatever. But you have to take all of that, bottle it up, put it up into something so that you have, them as a product, so to speak, so they can go out to schools and get more refinement there. That's not easy. It's almost like a junior high or middle school teacher in a public school situation.
Very similar. Yeah, you're kind of like the bridge. Yeah,
Yeah, except you get kids that actually want to be there for the most part. So
yeah, yeah. True.
it's definitely different. I want to totally change gears, and I want to ask you, and I don't know if this has ever been an issue for you or whatever, but I've had a bunch of people asking me this over the years, and I've gone through it. How do you approach performances from the mental aspect? Have you ever gone through like performance anxiety or stage fright?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I when I was newer to performing, which is basically college, we would always have these juries. Saxophone juries were scary enough, but that's my main instrument. The ones I got most nervous for are my secondary instruments, the flute. I actually studied flute with a very good teacher, John Barcelona. Um, and it's interesting. I practiced flute diligently in college, and I felt like I just hit whatever. I hit a certain area where I struggled. I really struggled. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just, and I, because of that, I was very aware of my limitations. And then I would be doing juries with people who are majoring in flute. So clearly, they're fantastic players in college.
Yeah.
And so I would always feel less than. And that's an unfortunate memory because I didn't have the experience. I just didn't have enough years on the instrument. Simple as that. So I kind of retired the flute for a bit. I played it less and less and less. I still played it once in a while, but kind of took several years off of the flute. Didn't even touch it. Didn't even own one. And then I guess the point is there was so much anxiety associated with flute that it wasn't pleasant to me. And that might happen to some people.
Yeah.
Like, this is just too, like, my nerves can't take it, whatever. So it's not enjoyable. So isn't it natural that I wouldn't touch it and wouldn't pursue it? Saxophone still was enjoyable. But only recently, I'd say the last 5-6 years, I became more, once again, renewed love in flute. Listening to James Galway,
Oh, yeah.
He's the most incredible musician I've ever heard. Everything he does is musically, technically, emotionally perfect. It's just the height of musicianship is James Galway. It truly is. And I would just listen to him as intently as I used to listen to Cannonball Adderley and Bird. I could really listen to every single phrase and every note like you're ingesting it. And that inspired me to pick up the instrument again. Now, believe me, I am no James Galway. But the point of this story is that the anxiety is gone. The anxiety is gone. It's been replaced by pleasure, by enjoyment. And again, our favorite word, curiosity.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, be more curious than you are nervous, if that is a possibility.
Oh, I love that.
And yeah, because and it's not like when you say, I feel nervous or I feel anxious about performing, the solution is not to say, okay, stop being anxious, be brave. That's the usual thing a coach might say, get in there and, try your best. You have to, that's called opposing forces. Like you're feeling anxious. And so the opposing force would be, don't feel anxious, be brave, be confident, be all these things. You can't just snap your fingers and be that, right?
Yeah.
So I call it jujitsu. It's got the energy's going this way. You want to hit it from the side. It's not an opposing force, but a different force, from a different direction. That force is curiosity and love, of course, but curiosity about how can I practice and how can I hold my mouth to make a better tone? That's usually the thing for me, is tone. If I hold it ever so slightly differently, does it? Oh, it does. You're curious. You're finding out about the instrument. And now it's not about how good am I? Am I a good person? Did I practice enough? That's not even part of the conversation, because now you're focused on being curious and exploring.
Redirecting that energy. It's martial arts. You don't want to hit something dead on. You want to redirect the energy.
Mm-hmm.
And focus it in a positive way. Yeah, definitely. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. That's definitely a tweetable.
Yeah, that's really the deal, I guess. I mean, it's been a year since I've been playing with Pete Chrisley's big band, and also another big band, Ron Jones' big band that Pete also plays in. So now for over a year, I've been playing once or twice a month with Pete Chrisley, who in my mind is, if you don't know who he is, you've got to Google him. He is the lead tenor for the Tonight Show band during Johnny Carson's reign. And I think a national treasure. He is the saxophone you hear on Steely Dan's Deacon Blues and FM, two of the most classic pop jazz solos ever recorded. Yeah. So he's just an amazing player, and he does it all. He does the pop stuff, he does jazz. And he's the nicest guy in the world, but I've been so intimidated and anxious and, oh God, what's going on in my head, you can't believe. I might stand up and take a solo and sound okay, sound fine. What's going on in my head is, oh my God, Pete's listening. Play better than that, and in reality, I don't even know if he's listening. But it's a head trip, I guess is what I'm saying, that you go through, the anxiety, the question you had. Again, different, changing your energy. Yeah. What my goal is on stage these days is, what kind of interesting thing can I do on this change? Always focused on tone and production, intonation, all the basics. Yeah. But I'm kind of more preoccupied with that than what this person over here might think. And I've got a quick, I don't know how much time we have. Okay, sure. But I got a quick story about the head trips we
please, yes.
put ourselves in. So I was in Aruba, beautiful island, and there was the Rippingtons, and we were playing a jazz festival there. And Candy Dolfer was ahead of us. She's wonderful. Crowd's going wild, and that's our turn to play. And first I'm thinking, oh, how are we going to outdo her? She's such a dynamic performer. And we were playing, and it's one of those places where the people are standing. There's not seats. They're standing. Okay. And who's about 50 feet in front of me, but Michael Brecker.
Oh, wow.
And he's like this, kind of listening, but you can tell he's listening, like not just casually listening, like listening. And I'm the saxophone player, so I assume he's kind of really checking. I was so nervous, anxious. Every bad, negative thought about myself came to the surface.
Wow.
Like, I suck. I'm out of tune. My tone's terrible. I'm not playing right. And sure enough, I gave probably, in my memory, probably one of the worst performances of my career. Wow. Because I was so distracted. I couldn't find my place to be. I was just so, and I'd play, look at him, play, look at him, play, look at, because he's one of my many idols. And he's right there in front of me listening.
Yeah.
So, come to find out, after we played, I was going to say, well, at least I'll go up to him and say hi and introduce myself. After we played, it wasn't him. It was some other dude that looked like him.
Oh my God, that's too funny.
And so I was like, oh man. That is when it really hit me. Like, I completely, in my opinion, gave away a perfectly good performance. In other words, I wasn't there for it. I was somewhere else. I was in ego world. And ego world is not meaning I'm the greatest player. That's not what. The ego is the part that wants to protect your emotions. And ego world is like, it's all about you. And it's all about how you sound and how you play and what this person thinks of you and will they like me. All that head trip is very externally motivated. Am I going to be liked? Am I going to be respected? That's a very, it's human nature. Come on, everyone does it.
Sure.
But it's very unproductive when you're on stage, terribly. And that's how I felt when I was in that flute choir too, literally shaking in my boots, playing flute in college, because I know that I'm in a jury, so they're judging how I'm playing, which made it worse. So how do you get around that? This is where training and practice comes in. Every day in the sacred practice time, you're connecting with your instrument, you're connecting with your emotions, you're finding your voice, your way of playing. And you have to feed into that bank account as often as you can. Every day is preferable, but as often as you can. So that you're constantly going to this space that is safe, that is interesting and creative, right? And productive. And you're really growing something, which is you. It's your musicianship. So that when the wind blows, and what I mean by that is like there's a really good player on stage with you or whatever, or in the audience, that all that training is keeping you solid. You're going to rely on your training at those moments.
That's
And
awesome advice.
that's what an athlete does. That's why they train with it. You don't think those people in the Olympics are very nervous? I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
But it's the training that takes over when the nerves are kind of jittery.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I also have a background in martial arts too, and one
Oh.
of the things that we've done is train as if. So like we had a simulator room where there would be rain, there would be snow, and training in conditions that most people don't think about. If someone comes
Mm-hmm.
up to attack you, you got to think, there's all these things you have to adjust for. So absolutely. And a lot of times too, I tell my students, it's not about you, the performance. There's an audience there. So
Mm-hmm.
focus on the one person in that audience that's having the most miserable day in creation, and what can you do to flip their mood?
Yeah.
So I like what you said about ego. Yeah.
And gosh, I'm going to draw a blank now. The judge on American Idol that took over after Paula Abdul left,
Not Carrie Underwood or?
no, not Carrie Underwood. Drawing a blank. I'm so sorry. She co-wrote many songs with. Anyway, a great thing, a very wise thing she said. She said, "Don't worry about the audience loving you. Show them what you love." What a beautiful statement. Show them
Wow.
what you love. That's really powerful. I've really taken that with me every day since she heard that on television. Like, wow, that's really good. You know, show
Yeah.
show, show them what you love. You know?
Yeah. It's interesting because, and that's perfect because a lot of people also talk about, you know, finding their own voice. Like, how do you find your own voice on your instrument? Is it just sitting there and, practicing? Like, what's the process for you for finding your own voice?
Um, the During the long tones and all that kind of stuff on saxophone, which is kind of part of the maintenance thing. I had a great saxophone teacher, who's now still a great friend. I see him on Facebook all the time, Leo Potts. He's the guy I credit for giving me my sound. Not that I sound like him, I sound like me, but he really showed me how to play the saxophone properly, tone and technique. He really did. And I tell him, he's standing right beside me every time that horn is in my hands. He's literally right beside me, telling me how to play it. I can feel him, his words. I'm refreshing my mind. And so anyway, it's to get your sound is the concept that this is the way I look at it. Here is our saxophone. I'm back up so you can see it.
Okay.
Everyone worries about the kind of saxophone and the mouthpiece and the reed, and that is all affects your sound. That's important. But the other half of the saxophone, if I can stand up, is you.
Yes.
And so here's the bell, the business end, right? The fingering and the mouthpiece. And it's now connected to your body, your embouchure, your throat, and most importantly, your diaphragm, which is where all the power is. So actually, the saxophone that you see is only 50% of the mechanism. The other 50% is you and your body. And that concept of the saxophone being this shape, really, it starts in your diaphragm, out your throat, into the neck, down the bell. That's the full shape of the saxophone. With that in mind, I try to get out of the way. relax everything except for my diaphragm. Relax everything. Relax my fingers, especially my throat, and even my embouchure. Leave it as loose as I can and still maintain pitch. Everything needs to be just above sleep. That's what I tell my students.
Oh,
But conversely, the diaphragm's got to be pumping, like you're about to receive a blow to the stomach. That intense.
got it. So yeah, so basically in a nutshell, it's really, you're not trying to, you have people that you admire, the sound that they make. It's not that you're sounding like them, you're sounding like you, but it all comes back to fundamentals. It's all making sure that you're following the fundamentals so that you can come out.
Yeah, if you, I do it like again with the long tones. I'm playing low pitches and really blowing, gain that saxophone to vibrate at its maximum potential. If you do it right, you will feel your own self vibrating too, even down to your diaphragm. Your whole, again, the whole system, the saxophone and you, shaking together, resonating together. That's when I think you have really got your sound together. Right?
That's awesome. And I think we're going to end on that note because I think that's such an important thing. There's been so many moments of gold from this interview. I really
Ah,
appreciate it. So
cool.
now, listen, Jeff, where can people find you on social media?
I have got a Facebook page, although one of them is full. I think the other one, Jeff Kashiwa Sax, has got some space. You can do that. You can follow me there. And then my website, jeffkashiwa.com. And I just Googled the person I was talking to that said, don't worry about the audience loving you. Just show them what you love, was Cara Dioguardi.
Oh,
Cara
right. That's right.
Dioguardi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good words of wisdom from a pro. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to write that down too. Okay. Awesome. So, Jeff, it's been wonderful speaking with you. I want to thank you for your
Yes,
time.
Donna.
And like I said, words of wisdom. Thank you so much. And
My pleasure.
wishing you all the best.
Great. Thanks.